Our boys are meant to become men. The man is there, but it doesn't always come out on its own. It's like it needs that other man to call him up, to say, okay, as a boy, this behavior might have been okay, right? It might have been completely appropriate for a 10-year-old boy. But now that you're a man, I'm going to call you up to a higher standard.
And if we wanted them to fly by 18, there were some things that had to be in place. How to treat a woman, how to be a good employee, how to be a good friend, how to be a good employer someday. You're going to lead people at some point. How do we do that? And just kind of looking at those bigger pictures. I just want to make sure. So you got to kind of do it in the way they sweep the floor, or in the way that they cut the grass, or the way that they treat their sister, or the way that they treat each other. And so I was always looking at those types of things.
And challenge them. And in your example of saying, hey, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do.
In all of the good times and even the trials, through tears and through laughter, yeah, I know that I'll smile when I think of you. Smile for the things you do. Smile, God gave me you. You are a reason I smile. Yeah.
This is Behind Our Smiles.
Pursuing connection.
And finding joy.
Even in the struggle. Sometimes after we record an episode, we go, oh man, we totally forgot to add one little thing we wanted to share, or one more point, and we have like a post podcast.
Yeah, well, maybe there's quite a few things, because as we start to pull on the thread, we're like, okay.
And we go home like, yeah, man, we could have said this, we could have added that. So today's episode's kind of a bit of a postscript to last week, because last week we talked about, our last episode, we talked about fathers and on Father's Day. And the thing in real life right now, we're talking about fathering a lot, and especially fathering boys, since we have boys and our boys are fathering boys. So we're getting more fathers and more boys today.
It's interesting because after we recorded last episode, I think we spent, number one, initially more time discussing what we could have added to it afterwards than we spent on the episode. And then this actually led to several weeks of
and on top of that too, then at my job, we recorded a YouTube episode talking more about fathers. So it's like we're kind of like swimming in the world of fathering and fathering boys especially.
And if you want to see that video she's talking about, we'll put a link in the show notes. One of our favorite things about the podcast is when you share what makes you smile about your husband or wife. And we appreciate you doing that. It always makes us smile, sometimes chuckle, and sometimes even cry a little bit, because we love hearing from you and what God is doing in your life. You can share at any time. Tara, T-A-R-A, at BehindOurSmiles.com. Today it's Heather sharing about her husband, Drew. She said, it makes me smile when I see Drew help our kids with anything. It can be baseball, car repair, teaching them about taxes, and most importantly, sharing the Lord with them. Well, Drew, what an amazing thing to have said about you. And Heather, again, thank you for sharing what makes you smile about your husband, Drew.
So this week, we're kind of going on a parenting angle. And part of me, Joe, gets always a little bit weird, like going, okay, are we qualified to speak as parents? Because we're still we're not in the thick of it, but we're just getting out of it. But at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, with raising boys, that we've been turning boys into men for 10 years now.
God's done the turning boys into men, but we've been able to.
We've been watching the process. Yes. You're so humble, Joe. But I'm like thinking when our first son turned that 12 and 13, because I don't know, raising our daughter was just a more seamless transition. She just seemed to move from girlhood to womanhood effortlessly.
And it kind of, she lulled us into a very false sense of security. She was our oldest, and we thought, man, we're great parents. And then we had 3 boys and realized we got a lot to learn. But even our sons have said, did Joey ever get into trouble?
It was, I mean, maybe there's some that have trouble, but for me, it felt less complex. Where I think when puberty hits and those boys turn into men, and so we've been doing that, and then we had 3 boys in a row. So I'm like, yeah, it's been 10 years of parenting teenage boys. And so we have a lot we're thinking about, and something that we have to have conversations about all the time. And really, when it comes to our marriage issue, it really is an issue, because there's been a lot of tension over when there's problems with teenage sons, how do we handle it? And we didn't always agree on how to handle it. It creates a level of conflict. And it had the ability to kind of divide us when we go, no, how? So it's not something we have all the answers to, but it does definitely affect our marriages when you're in those throes of raising teenagers.
Well, and we weren't perfect at it by any stretch, but I do appreciate the way that you allowed our conflict to be behind closed doors. I mean, yes, we did live conflict in front of our kids to show them that conflict does happen, number one, and how to resolve it. But when it came to disagreements about something in particular with raising the kids, we always would work that out so that the kids never had that leverage to kind of work against us, because if it's there, they're going to find it. Right? Even the best kids are going to find that leverage. So I do appreciate, Tara, that you always allowed us to kind of work those differences out when we don't agree. And many times it was always great to be able to discuss with you, because you did have a different viewpoint, but you were also willing to hear my side. Like, hey, should we go this way?
Yeah. Well, and for reference, again, we're like, when I say we're in the thick of it, our oldest son's 23 now, our next son is almost 20, and we have a 16-year-old at home. So it's like, okay, this is our life. And a lot of times when you're parenting too, like, you had a different way of approaching an issue. And sometimes it's almost like, I didn't see what you were doing. And then it was a few years back, maybe 6-7 years ago, that I read an article somewhere getting some, like, this is my life as these boys and turning them into men. And it was like, the phrase was a father's job is to pull the man out of his son. And whatever that little paragraph was about it, I brought it over to you and said, I get it now. Like, I get, like, that's what you're trying to do. You're like, yes, honey, I'm pulling the man out. And I thought, okay, I didn't have to do that with my daughter. It wasn't the same kind of process. Yeah. And it kind of helped us to parent together better, to say, okay, Joe, you have a unique role in these boys than I do. And so we wanted to kind of today talk about what in the world do we mean by pulling the man out.
Yeah, because
sounds kind of violent.
You are, obviously a mom's job is to be more tender and nurturing and caring. So you gave great balance to that. So if I'm doing this by myself, there's no way I can get that full, well-rounded balance. But because of your nurturing ability, it allowed me to really go and be more intentional about looking at where they were and where we really wanted them to be. And if we wanted them to fly by 18, there were some things that had to be in place. And then the other thing I really appreciate, and before we get started, just wanted to highlight a couple of these things. One is that we didn't do it perfectly by any stretch, but we were willing to yield to God and willing to chase His leadership to the best of our ability. And honestly, there's no way that we get from point A to point B in the way that we wanted to without God's intervention. He was amazing.
Well, with that whole transition, I like that Bible verse in 1 Corinthians 13, and it applies, I guess, to everybody. But that transition of, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. And I think that's was like kind of what you're doing. Like, okay, and especially for me as the mom, taking care of them as babies and as children. And then it's like, okay, now we got to put the ways of childhood behind us. And what does it mean to, for them to become a man? Again, for me, I saw too that big transition from mom's voice being prominent in their lives versus their dad's. And it doesn't mean I wasn't involved in their lives. I didn't teach them. I wasn't all that, but kind of going, dad needs to be a little bit stronger of an influence for that man to come out. And I feel like it started right around that puberty time. I kind of felt like I got to step aside a bit and let dad really, really kind of like do things his way sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it was okay to nurture, but it also was there was this ability where they really needed to be able to, if they're going to be driving a vehicle at 16 years old, there had to be some things that they were able to accomplish prior to that. And so I kind of always had this bigger goal in mind, flying by the time they're 18, but I always had these little goals. And once I began, and part of the problem, I think, for us, Tara, was I wasn't always able to communicate that. And I was second guessing myself a lot too. But once I began to be able to articulate that for you, to say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Right now, if they got a driver's license, how in the world would they handle that? They wouldn't be able to. So how do we get them from here to where they need to be when they're 16?
And it doesn't start when they're 15 with a permit. It's
like
I mean, 12.
The night before the test is not going to work. We have to get them ready to go. And that doesn't mean taking them on side roads and putting them behind the wheel. I'm referring to life in general, the character development and hard working and those types of things, and being aware. Like we could teach them behavioral modification things, like where you would say, don't do this and don't do that and don't do that. And there are times and spaces and places for that. But if we could teach them the overall arcing of what it means to become a man, then a lot of those questions they answer on their own because they've been trained in that way.
Yeah, because that's the catch, is kind of having a goal in mind when you say, okay, I want to see my boys turn into men, what that picture looks like. And I think I like the way you said that. Okay, I have a picture like when they get to 16, they've got to be able to handle the vehicle. When they get to 18, they should be able to handle this. By the time that they are married, or become a father, they need to have these skills and kind of that future. What other goals did you have for your boys in your mind?
Financial, all kinds. How are they going to handle themselves financially? Are they going to be able to, if all of a sudden something happened to me when they're 17, can they survive? I just think about all of those things, not to be morbid in that way, but just thinking about, okay, how do I equip them to still be a support? But my support should become less and less, right? As they take off and they fly. So how to treat a woman, right? How to treat your friends, how to be a good employee, how to be a good friend, how to be a good employer someday. You're going to lead people at some point. How do we do that? And just kind of looking at those bigger pictures. But the problem is when kids are, especially teenagers, you can't have those kinds of conversations with them. They're not going to respond well to, okay, I just want to make sure you're ready to run a company someday, or I just want to make sure. So you got to kind of do it in the way they sweep the floor, or in the way that they cut the grass, or the way that they treat their sister, or the way that they treat each other. And so I was always looking at those types of things going, okay, if he continues, one of my sons continues to make this decision, and the way that he's treating his sister, where is this going to lead? And so at some point you go, okay, maybe today's not the day that you step in and make that correction, unless it's something a little bit more where you have to step in. But you start to look at that, or we would be out doing something else and I could have that conversation. Hey, by the way that you talked to your sister yesterday, you realize this. So it's those types of things. But looking back on it, it honestly was, hey, God, help me, because I don't know what I'm doing.
I think overall, I like that pulling out, meaning the man is there. Like, okay, our boys are meant to become men.
And they wanted to.
And the man is there, but it doesn't always come out on its own. It's like it needs that other man to, like, and the other words we have used is like the calling up.
Yeah.
To say, okay, as a boy, this behavior might have been okay, right? It might have been completely appropriate for a 10-year-old boy. But now that you're a man, I'm going to call you up to a higher standard. And I feel like that was partly your job, is to kind of set that standard high and challenge them more. You did a better job challenging them sometimes than I did, even though I wanted them to become those things. I feel like your voice and then your example of saying, hey, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do. And that's huge.
Human nature is to take the easy route. It just is. And honestly, I would take the easy route if I had the choice. I continually tried to make the decision for the right thing, not the easy thing. And sometimes the right thing was the easy thing, and that was cool. But sometimes it was the hard thing. And I think with our kids, especially our boys, Jolie was a lot more, our daughter was a lot more. She kind of gravitated toward that. It was pretty amazing. She followed the example of her mom. But with the boys, it's much easier on a Saturday to play video games all day. It's much easier to watch movies and do those things. And so not to ruin their childhood, because that was never, they had great childhoods. But as we kind of started to watch or see, how do we make sure that they're ready by the time they're 18. So those challenges were really important. And I didn't always get that right. And there are things that I would do differently along those lines, but we did challenge them. And then hard conversations were also something that needed to happen. And those are things that we want to avoid, but it was really, really good to sit down and have those conversations. And then you had to watch. That was probably the hardest part.
It almost reminds me, of toddlers. When you have a toddler, you're like, okay, you have to have the gates up because at any moment they're going to climb the stairs or get in the cabinets or put something in their mouth. And a teenager, you think to yourself, okay, we don't have to watch them anymore because they can handle themselves. Again, they can get in a car and drive. But there's still a level of, I'm watching. I saw you at the boys. You're watching an attitude. You're watching even a facial expression. You're watching a phrase come out of their mouth going, wait, why'd you say that? So I think it's easy to put your guard down when you have teenagers going, okay, I don't need to worry about them choking on a grape anymore or wandering off across the street. But I think I still saw in you as a father them going, I'm watching you, and having that daily, I'm on it. Who are our boys becoming right now? Again, what are these decisions?
I wanted them to have my voice in their head when they're about to make a decision that's not healthy. But I also didn't want to be overbearing. And so that was I leaned on you a lot to say, hey, where am I at? But it's funny because when we look back, there were times when you thought, okay, maybe you're calling something that isn't right. Like I was calling them out on something that I saw. and you're like, maybe you're being a little hard on them, or maybe they didn't really do that. And now my sons admit that they actually were kind of trying to manipulate there. So I think as long we led with love, which I think is the important part. The Bible talks about truth, and that the truth must be spoken, but it must be spoken in love. And so I think that's where we gained a lot with our kids. And I heard this quote, I don't remember when or where, but the idea that if once you lie, every truth becomes questionable.
Wow.
And so it's not that I was perfect. It's not that I never exaggerated anything I'm not saying that by any stretch, but I always tried to live upright and honest before them. And when I blew it, I tried to say, and I wasn't perfect at that either, by the way, but I tried to say, hey, that's on me. I blew that.
But I love the fact that that daily interaction with the kids, even at the stage, when you're teenagers, there's those months and those years where, your house is maybe a bed and breakfast, or it's like they show up at night and leave in the morning and you don't not even sure if they came home during the day. It's like, wait, they are out and doing all these things. And so you don't have the same amount of time you have with them as when they're younger. But I think still being available and always still checking in. And so sometimes we end up having the conversations late at night when we're expecting to have it, but that's when they're home and that's when, it happens. So I appreciate for you, pulling the man out means that you have to be available, like we said last time, to answer those issues when they show up.
So we watch YouTube videos from time to time, and sometimes the commentator will have a pro tip. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give a pro tip really quick, and this may be very obvious, I don't know, but the real questions never come in the first few minutes. Mm-hmm. They just don't. And if we don't make time to just talk with our kids on a surface level about the way that they felt on the roller coaster today, or whatever it is that they were doing, those harder, real questions don't come. And there were times I remember in my kids' bedroom just sitting with them as we're going to bed. I pray with them and sit with them, we talk. And then there was a little bit of silence, and we're just kind of sitting there in the silence and letting the silence kind of breathe. And then all of a sudden, Dad, do you have a minute? Dad, I'm kind of curious about it. Or Dad, I'm really struggling here. And that's when those moments came. Not when we're in the middle of watching a movie or
well, what I saw sometimes too is, like, let's say the son is walking around and you kind of know something's off. Like they're just acting different, something's wrong. And you ask the classic question, hey, you okay? Yeah. Anything bothering you? No. And you just kind of, again, just being around and being available for that. And then sometimes it takes that consistent presence saying, hey, I'm just going to hang out. And all of a sudden, like, you have to build that time and trust to finally go, well, actually, so it's sometimes that first ask, you say, are you okay? It's, yeah, I'm fine.
And sometimes,
and that's the case with a lot of relationships, right? It takes that breathing space in your relationship to finally go, actually, I'm not that fine.
Yeah. And that can happen over a video game or a movie. I think it's just, you got to be willing to pause in that moment to say, okay, we're going to shut the movie off because this is way more important, or ping pong or whatever it is that we played catch. Steve and I played catch a lot. And that's where some of those conversations happened. But I think I'm so grateful that God and Tara, you and I read a lot of books and we've read a lot of blogs, and we're trying to do it right. We prayed a lot, but I'm really grateful that God did point out some of those things early to say, hey, don't be so quick to rush off to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Don't be so quick to dismiss it. If they say they're fine, don't necessarily believe them.
The kids think that we're in a hurry.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not going
to happen, right? To say, hey, can you wrap this up? So I don't have everything in your brain memorized. I try to watch you, Joe, and like I said, in planning this episode out, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to think of just how to explain kind of some of how you've pulled the man out. So I thought, well, I'll fall back on what I always fall back on, which is a little word game and a little cross stitch, as I thought about what I'm seeing in you. So I'm kind of guessing some of these for you because it's what I've seen you do. If someone's kind of saying, okay, what does it really look like to pull a man out of your boys, right? So I'm like, okay, we got the word pulling, we're doing the hard work. And sometimes that pulling is a little bit tiring and a little bit tough. It's not always easy. It's a process that happens over the years. And sometimes I love the fact that sometimes when you and the boys have been in conflict, there's an element of like, they don't like what you've said. You're like, hey, I'm pulling the man out right now. And it almost gives them that, okay, like, that's what I want, right? I don't want to stay a boy. So for me, with the P, it has to be for praying. And this isn't just referring to you as a parent, right? Saying, okay, first we need to pray of how do we raise our boys and how do we become a man, but imparting that same value to our boys. Like that's the first step. Yeah. And relying that being the man is not knowing everything and doing everything right and being superhuman, but it's first being submitted to God.
Right. And living that out in front of them. And we prayed together a lot as a family. We prayed out loud together, and that can be really awkward, especially when the kids are young. When they're really little, it's fine. Everything works out fine. But praying in front of your spouse, if you haven't done it before, it's kind of a new thing. It can be. And what I wanted it to be is I wanted it to be completely comfortable for our kids to stop and pray at any time. Because if it's not comfortable to come into the presence of God and ask for help or to say thank you or whatever, I think that can create undue hardship later in life. And so I love, number one, praying for them. Yes, being on our knees, praying for them, believing that God had them and asking for his help and how to guide in that, but also living by example and saying, you know what, guys, what is going on right here is above my pay grade, right? We need to stop and pray. And there were many times I say, okay, guys, let's gather up, right? Or let's come into the kitchen. Let's just pray over this, because, and you were great at that too, Tara. But what we wanted to do is just instill this idea that God is approachable at any time. And you don't have to feel awkward about it. Even if someone in the room with you will make you feel awkward or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can still pray. And so, yeah, so I think leading with prayer is huge. And then the other part of that is I honestly was in over my head. And so
for our boys as well, like not so much like man is being Superman, right? Like this idea of going, you're going to have a lot of times in your life like this situation you're walking through, you're not going to know what to do, right? When our boys are approaching difficult situations in their lives, to go, that first step is always praying.
So I always prayed for our provision, but the three things that I always prayed with the boys was wisdom, discernment, and favor. And I always felt like if God says in James that he's going to give that wisdom freely if we ask. And so we want to ask so that we can get that wisdom. But discernment is so important, especially in the world, and that's only gotten worse, right? The discernment that you need to have, but also favor, to have favor with those that you come in contact with your future employer, with your future wife, with your future whoever, but also that you can extend favor. Mm-hmm. And so as we prayed through those things, I look back and I'm like, that is so incredible, because all of my boys are wise. Mm-hmm. They all have discernment. Now, I mean, they're young and they're going to make decisions.
They're growing in discernment,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But they have incredible favor. I look and I hear stories and I'm like, I'm starting to point those things out. Like, you do realize what you're telling me is that you had incredible favor. So these prayers don't return void, and they are not wasted when you pray over your kiddos.
So I appreciate that, Joe. I got that right for my P. My P for you, understanding. And I feel like this is the opposite. A boy, in a sense, is ignorant, right? A boy doesn't know everything he needs to know. Where they become a man, there's things they need to know, right? There's a new level of understanding they need to have to make it out in the real world. So your role in teaching them, like, hey, son, I need to tell you something about how this works, right? And I think that constant daily instruction so that they have the understanding they need to go into the world, especially then not just teenagers, but young men, right? They're 18, 19, 20, like, okay, this is it. Especially that window of time where it's like, pretty soon you're out of my home. Mm-hmm. And you always really took advantage of those opportunities to teach and give them understanding.
I think it was really important. And again, I don't know exactly where I learned all this. We read a lot of books and just were really looking and praying for wisdom, but cultivate an environment where they were willing to ask the questions and willing to be taught. And that had to happen when they were younger. That had to happen when they really wanted to wash the dishes. When you're a kid for the first time, like, hey, I want to do that. But just cultivating this environment or this atmosphere, if you will, where learning was a regular part of it. And you did that really well with the homeschooling. But also, this is what it is to be a man and to have those conversations and to talk that out with them as they got older and we'd watch TV shows together, to be able to pause those TV shows and say, okay, what is happening here is not right. This is not how we should handle this situation. Or, man, that's exactly right. What they did there, that's exactly how I would say we should handle that. And then allowing them to ask the questions. So like in a TV example, we pause the TV show. We're like, no, that's not how that should be handled. Then they will ask the question, Dad, how should it be handled? Well, what about this? What about that? And the other thing that we did is we taught them way from the beginning, because we used to watch sports in the house. And one of the reasons we stopped is because of the dumb commercials, but is to to train them to say, no, we're not going to watch that commercial that's seductive or inappropriate. We're not going to watch that. We're not going to subject ourselves to that. And then teaching them why that is important, especially as they got older. There's some things when the kids are younger, they're not going to get it.
Right. That's what
But when
the young men.
Yeah, when they get older, you go, man, you don't want to steal from your future wife. You don't want to be, to be able to talk those things through with them and to be able to help them understand that the enemy is out to steal, kill, and destroy, and he's going to use everything that he can. But if you live like no one else, you'll be able to live like no one else. And
Dave
so,
Ramsey thing.
yeah, we really
Make hard choices
in
in those
right?
beginning years, and it makes it easier later.
And one of the other things that we would say is your future self is going to thank you, right?
That's a future orientation.
I mean, when they were saving for something or they were working hard for something, we're like, your 16-year-old self or you're 18 or whatever it was, they're going to thank you for working and sacrificing to be where to achieve your goals.
I think they see that now.
Yeah. And especially when those goals are aligned with that first pray, right? When they're aligned with where God is leading.
Yeah. So becoming a man has, you have to have a new understanding, right? You're no longer ignorant. You're no longer a child. You understand more of adulthood and manhood and world and how the world works. And they learn that from their father, especially with that loving guidance to say, how do I interpret these situations? So those are two primary things I saw. And then L is your favorite in terms of how you pulled the man out of our sons. And that was teaching them to lead their heart. L.
That was, I think our kids laugh every time that if they see follow your heart come up anywhere, they just laugh and they're like, oh, Dad's not going to like that. The Bible tells us our hearts are wicked above all else, right? So if we're following our hearts, it's going to get us into all kinds of trouble. And by the way, my hands in the air, been there, done that. No, I think God, the more that I understand God's relationship with us and what he's asking of us, he is really asking us to lead our hearts, to look at the situation and not say, well, I'm going to go this way because it feels good, or I'm going to go this way because it makes the most sense or whatever. No, it's actually getting before God and saying, God, which way would you want me to go? And I cannot lead my heart. This was a big thing that we instilled in all of our kids. We cannot lead our hearts if we're not being led. We have,
right.
and if I'm not being led by God, I'm being led by something. Something is leading me, and so it's really important to have a regular. What do they call that when you have a regular
reckoning?
Inspection. What do they call that?
Oh,
search me, Holy Spirit,
audit.
and know. Right, an audit.
There we go.
To have a regular audit to make sure that what I'm. Thank you, by the way.
Reckoning can also be appropriate.
Well, if I don't do a regular audit, I definitely could have
reckoning. Oh man.
But to do a regular audit to say, God, are you leading me in these last 5 big decisions I made? Is this where you want me to be? Because it's a lot easier to turn the corner if it's the last 5, right? Or the last decision I made wasn't the right one. It's easier to get back on track than if I've done a year of bad decisions, and some of them might be right, but if God's not leading me, then where am I going? And so I probably that one point probably got pushed more than anything else because they would say, Dad, we want to do this, or what about that, or what about that?
Basically, again, I don't feel like it. Right. No one feels like it. And part of related to that was they were going from puberty into young men who was self-government. Again, you're not a toddler anymore. We're not going to watch you. We're not going to follow you around. And you have freedom to make a lot of different choices. So you have to govern yourself into what the right choices are, because we no longer can make those choices for you. We can't just put you in your playpen and say, don't eat that toy. So learning to lead your heart is part of that process.
And while you're under our roof, we're going to be watching, and we're going to call you on stuff when we notice. But once you're out, once they're living somewhere else, then it becomes a lot more difficult. You have to have that relationship with them to be able to. And I have had a couple of conversations with my sons that are not in the house anymore. Not anything bad, just some things I've seen, and we've been able to have conversations.
Well, I think in those situations too, they do appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like saying, even though they're men, and even for you, Joe, you still appreciate someone else calling a man out in you. You're never too old. You've had people in your life go, that's not,
right.
that's kind of childish response, right? Like, let's call the man out in you. So I think if they're inviting it, it's 100% appropriate.
And it's great because I don't necessarily talk to them like that.
No.
Like, hey, but what I try to do is steer them the way we did in the end of them living at home, but steer them into asking the right questions. Have them get the revelation. The revelation moments should be theirs, because if I'm giving them the revelation moment, it's not gonna really stick, and it's not gonna mean as much. And this is what's really cool. And this is how God has just so richly blessed us. The types of conversations that I'm having with my 19-year-old and my 23-year-old there are some people my own age I'm not able to have these kinds of conversations with. It's just the way that it is, but it's the way that they're living for God is amazing. And it's not, it's their decision day by day, every single decision. That's your choice. This is the decision. That's the choice to chase God or not. This is the decision to lead my heart. And we can't do anything about the decision I made yesterday or last week or a minute ago, but I can do something about this decision. So, I mean, we may be doing a very different podcast in a year, and our kids may be doing something different. But right now, they are actively chasing Jesus. And this is the other big thing, and the lead your heart part. We're seeing it everywhere. There are amazing Christian men, quote unquote. We don't know what their lives were like up to this point, that are falling left and right. And I will, when we would see that when our kids were younger, we would point those things out and say, that's not who we want to be. That's not what
our goal.
God has called us to be. Because you can have your entire life be incredible and you fall at the end and the whole thing is in jeopardy.
Well, and it's never your goal, right? You never say my goal is to, make my life, burn to the ground. But if you're not leading your heart, you just end up there and not realizing it. And
it's not, Tara, you and I, we may have even talked about this on the podcast, but it's not, there's never a catastrophic fall.
It's always a small
It's
one.
a series of small compromises that lead to what appears to be a catastrophic fall. And so we just, try to instill in our kids in the lead your heart department, you don't want it any other way. Trust me. This is how you want it. God has a purpose and a plan for your life. He created you with a purpose in mind. He has all of these incredible things. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. All of these things will be added to you. Lead your heart in the way that God wants you to go. I'm not saying your life's going to be perfect. I'm not saying it's going to be pain-free. I'm not saying you're not going to suffer. But there's an element of having God connected with you on that level that makes the suffering less.
Well, and there's the principle too, that as we seek him more, he gives us his desires.
Yes.
And the desires of our heart. So It's not like it's this life of, of torture, but just kind of letting God lead and going, okay, now, the desires of our heart are coming true. So we still have a few more things to finish pulling the man out. We're not quite done. The man's only halfway pulled out right now. So we got a boy man on our task at our hands. So let's finish our conversation next week. And we'd love to hear from you about your journey in raising boys into men, because we're still learning along the way too.
Yeah. So we'll continue this or complete this next episode. But would love to hear from you. Like Tara said, you can email us anytime, Tara, Tara, at behindoursmiles.com. I do want to encourage you. It's never too late to surrender to God, to just say, God, this is not where I wanted to end up. This is not where I thought I'd end up. What can I do from here? And if we spend so much time worried about the past or trying to reconcile that in our heads, that's not going to allow us to move forward with where God wants us to be. And if you have younger children, man, this is a great time to say, now is the day. We're going to make that choice. If we can pray for you in any way whatsoever, or you want to talk it out, further discussion, please drop us a line anytime. Tara, Tara, at behindoursmiles.com.